In today's video, I'm doing another Game Boy screen upgrade, this time in a Game Boy Advance SP. Nintendo has an interesting history with their Game Boy screens. From the get-go, in the original DMG-01 Game Boy, the screens have never really been great. Now, this wasn't necessarily a technology limitation. I mean, the Atari Lynx, which released about the same time as the original Game Boy, had a beautiful, backlit color display. Next to the Lynx, the Game Boy looked like an old, monochromatic, ancient ancestor. But we all know how the handheld wars turned out. Nintendo's decision to use an older display technology at a cheaper price point actually worked out pretty well for them. But throughout the years, the screens have improved as newer Game Boy models came out. Let's take a look at a few. So first, here's the original Game Boy DMG-01. Now this was the only device to have this green tinted screen, which supposedly made it easier to see. Following that was the Game Boy Pocket. Nintendo did away with the tinting and went to a pure black and gray screen here. But without adequate lighting, it's still not a great experience. Then came the Game Boy Color. This model swapped out that monochromatic screen for a colored display. But there's still no built-in lighting. The next evolution of the Game Boy was the Game Boy Advance. In addition to the new form factor and additional trigger buttons, the screen grew over half an inch. But still no light. Then, finally, in the fifth iteration of the Game Boy screen, Nintendo added a light. The Game Boy Advance SP, which stood for Special Edition, included a front light. And then a later revision came out, which moved the light behind the screen to finally become a backlit device. Well, when I said that the SP was the first Game Boy with a light, that's not entirely true. There actually was one other Game Boy device released with a light before the SP, and that was the aptly named Game Boy Light. But this one only released in Japan. Now the front light definitely makes the SP easier to play, but it can still be improved. So I bought a backlit IPS display kit from AliExpress. I thought this Famicom case looked pretty sweet, so I bought the version that had both this case and the new screen for around $55. Okay, well let's open it up and take a look inside. So here's the new shell, which looks like a Super Famicom. And the green and blue shoulder buttons really are a nice touch. We also have a couple of screwdrivers, which I won't use. And here's the screen itself. It was stuck to the inside of the bubble wrap pouch, so I had to tear it open to get it out. But yeah, it looks like a screen. Now before I do the screen replacement, I want to take some power draw measurements and just see how power hungry the new display is. So I hooked up the stock SP to my power supply without a game and turned it on. And as you can see here, with the front light on, it's drawing around 43 milliamps. And with the front light off, it jumps down to about 18 milliamps. So the light on an unmodified, front-lit Game Boy Advance SP draws around 25 milliamps of current. So that's the benchmark. As with any mod, the first thing to do is to open her up. Since I'm replacing the case, I also removed these hinges so I can use them in the new shell. But if you're using your existing shell, you don't need to do this part. Then I dropped in the new screen. This screen replacement was advertised as a quote-unquote drop-in replacement, so there's no need to modify the case to get it to fit. And true to its word, the screen just dropped right in and lined up perfectly. There's nothing else that needs to be done to the screen itself, so after pulling off the backing to the mounting tape, I went ahead and reassembled the top half of the shell. Next, I installed the hinges. Now these were very difficult to get in all the way. If you're having trouble with them like I did, first check to make sure they're lined up correctly in the holes. And then you might need to add a little bit of force by pressing it into a hard surface or maybe tapping it gently with a rubber mallet. The instructions online tell you to connect the screen to the test point labeled Q12B. The schematic shows that Q12 is a transistor that looks to be connected to the button that turns the light on and off. So I'm guessing that the button for the light will also toggle the backlight for this display as well. But I guess we'll confirm that after it's all back together. So I soldered one end of the wire to this test point. And I soldered the other end to the pad on the ribbon cable. Okay, that should be it. So I went ahead and reassembled the case. Well, the Super Famicom shell does look really neat. It's always nice having a fresh shell on an old device. But enough admiration of the shell, let's see how this mod looks. Well, it's certainly nice and bright. Oh man, this screen really does look amazing. Okay, so this button cycles through the different brightness levels. Now there are 15 different levels in total, so if you only want to lower the brightness one notch, you have to press it 15 times to have it cycle back all the way through the different brightness settings. And I could see how this could be annoying really fast. Now one thing I didn't mention is that there's actually two touch sensors built in below the screen. The sensor on the bottom right will also cycle through the brightness levels, but honestly I'd prefer just to press the physical button. And if you tap and hold on the left side, it cycles between 8 different color modes. Now as you can see here, it has a grayscale mode, and it can tint the screen with various colors as you cycle through them. I suppose this is pretty neat if you're into that kind of thing. And the last cool trick this screen does is something that a lot of reviewers really loved. If you tap and hold on the right side, it will overlay the screen with black lines. You can use this to simulate a pixel grid or horizontal or vertical scan lines. The reason it can do this is because the resolution of the replacement screen is actually 3 times higher than the resolution of the original screen. So all it has to do is scale the pixels down in order to draw the overlay. Alright, so let's now take a look and see how power hungry this new backlight is. With its brightness at the lowest setting, it's drawing around 108 milliamps. And when I increase it to its highest brightness setting, that jumps up to 220 milliamps. Now, the stock SP has a 600 milliamp hour battery. So even if you have the brightness at the lowest setting, you're not going to squeeze more than maybe 3 or 4 hours max of gameplay out of a fully charged SP with this screen mod. Well, I have to say, this is one of the nicest replacement displays I've seen in a handheld. I think the fact that it's the same aspect ratio of the original screen really helps. Now, up until now, I've been playing Game Boy Advance games on my Game Boy Micro, but the micro screen is just so small. I'd love to use this as my go-to device for playing Game Boy games, but I just don't know. I mean, the battery drain, that's a deal killer for me. And there's just no way it would last during a full day of travel. Now maybe if you're going to do this mod, it might be good to get one of those aftermarket 800 or 900 milliamp hour batteries to accompany it. Okay, that wraps up another episode. Thanks for joining me today as we looked at how to replace the screen in my Game Boy Advance SP. If this video inspired you to mod your own SP, then you'll find the link to the screen I used in the description below. Alright, well that's it for now, so until next time, go make something cool.